From the shocking news of his accidental drug overdose to the devastating impact his death had on the entire MMA community, some new details have come to light about Stephen Bonnar's death. Starting with what actually happened to the fighter. Now I know that the word legend gets thrown around a lot these days, but Bonnar truly deserves it. He was a one-of-a-kind player who had a major impact on the sport during a crucial turning point. And let me tell you, there are only a few fighters that MMA owes a forever debt of gratitude. So you can imagine the shockwaves that went through the UFC community when news of his passing hit. But trust me, the real reason behind his death is a lot more shocking. In the beginning, people thought that he passed away because of heart issues. But now, new information has come to light, folks. An official report about his death says that he actually died from an accidental drug overdose. The Clark County Coroner's Office in Nevada confirmed this to the folks over at MMA Fighting. This is something that could really tarnish his legacy. The dude was one of the most important fighters in UFC history, and it's not like Bonnar didn't earn that title. Back in 2005, when he stepped into the octagon for the first time, nobody in their right mind would have thought the UFC would become this massive international powerhouse that's worth billions of dollars. Nah, man, MMA was struggling to survive in North America. The UFC's big shots, Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, Lorenzo and Frank, were bleeding money like crazy, and things were looking bleak. The end was right around the corner, and the UFC needed a miracle. And guess what? Bonnar and his buddy Forrest Griffin were that freaking miracle. These dudes, they were like your everyday guys, nothing fancy, but at the 11th hour, when it seemed like all hope was lost, they stepped into the cage and put on an absolute classic of a fight. That showdown was pure gold, and it breathed life back into the UFC. It was like a Hollywood movie, man. The underdog saving the day and giving the UFC the boost it desperately needed. And these guys weren't your typical fighters. Nah, they were college-educated, witty, and charming as hell. They showed the world that MMA wasn't just about barbarism and violence. Fast forward 17 years, and that epic battle between Griffin and Bonnar still holds up. In that fight, Griffin dominated the first round. Bonnar came back strong in the second, and the third round was an absolute nail-biter. It could have gone either way, but Griffin managed to secure the win in the final minute. And guess what? The viewership numbers were off the charts. People were glued to their screens, witnessing these regular dudes with regular jobs fighting their hearts out on national television. It was like a modern-day gladiatorial showdown, and it was all about changing their lives forever. But the MMA, man, it's a sport that often forgets its own history, especially when it comes to fighters who never snagged a major title. And it's a damn shame because our boy Bonnar didn't get to enjoy the fruits of his hard work as much as others did back then. The dude even went up against a whole lot of former and future champions. We're talking about names like Griffin, Evans, Jones, Coleman, and Silva. He'd fought some serious battles. And yeah, he made the transition to pro wrestling after leaving the UFC. But here's the deal. His last few years weren't easy, you know? MMA doesn't treat its fading legends too kindly. There's no retirement pension, no health insurance, no backup plan for what comes next. Sadly, Bonnar experienced that firsthand. But here's the thing, his legacy goes beyond wins, belts, or money. He's a freaking seismic part of the sport's fabric. And he was a fan favorite throughout his 7-year UFC career. He even had a gig commentating on some of the most epic moments in MMA history with the WEC. And let's not forget his iconic call during Anthony Pettis' Showtime kick on Benson Henderson. It was pure gold, one of the best ever. To be honest, he's one of the few fighters who can be directly credited for bringing MMA into the mainstream. Several fans and fighters today can trace their love for the sport back to his television debut. And so it's no surprise that people are unsettled by how he passed away. According to MMA Fighting, the coroner's office revealed that Bonnar's cause of death was accidental OD on fentanyl, parafluorofentanyl, and metragynine intoxication. He was only 45 years old, man. That's way too young. They didn't give out any other details about the circumstances of his death, citing the need to respect medical privacy laws. So all we have is an email they sent to the website. Now, I gotta break it down for you. Fentanyl is a super strong synthetic opioid that's causing a lot of trouble in the ongoing opioid crisis. It's like 100 times more powerful than morphine. And it's been responsible for so many overdose deaths in the US. And a lot of times, it's accidental. This is the same drug that was the reason behind Jordan Young's untimely death in 2021. Another substance they found in Bonnar's system was parafluorofentanyl, which is like a cousin of fentanyl. And finally, mitragynine, which is part of this legal painkiller called kratom. It's incredibly sad, but MMA fighters are really prone to opioid addiction because of what they go through in the sport. They're always pushing their bodies to the max, and injuries are just part of the deal. So when they want to bounce back fast and get back in the ring, they can end up relying on painkillers. And that, my friends, sets them up for a dangerous cycle of dependency. Seriously, these drugs are no joke. And here's the scary part. Sometimes it's mixed with other hard drugs, and you can't even tell. The Drug Enforcement Agency in the US is calling fentanyl the deadliest drug threat our country has ever faced. This is a tragic reminder of how serious substance misuse can be and the consequences it can have. And do you know what the saddest part about this is? During an interview with MMA Fighting in September 2021, Bonnar opened up about his use of opioids. He shared that he had a legit prescription for oxycodone, taking around 30 milligrams per day to manage the long-term injuries he suffered from fighting and pro wrestling. And guess what? When they asked him about potential abuse, he got really defensive. And folks, that was a major red flag. Bonnar also mentioned that he felt like he got blacklisted by the UFC in 2012, which was when he tested positive for steroid use after his fight with Anderson Silva. It was a tough situation, man, and instead of scrutinizing him, people should have tried to help him out. The fact that we condemn drug use only makes it much harder to deal with. It's good that the UFC has made sure to show him some major love, at least. They gave him a proper tribute, recognizing his epic run as a finalist in the Ultimate Fighter 1 and his well-deserved spot in the Hall of Fame. And guess who led that tribute? None other than his opponent from that unforgettable fight that practically saved the UFC, Forrest Griffin. And man, did he have some heartfelt words to share. Stefan was a lot of things, he said. He was always the most interesting person in the room, had the biggest heart, and most importantly, he was my friend. He added that he also loved it when people got excited. After they found out they were friends, you can tell just by his words that the two had a special bond. But it wasn't just Griffin feeling the impact of Bonnar's loss. The entire MMA community has been devastated by this news. Fighters have been pouring out their emotions, sharing their memories and love for Stefan. Kenny Florian, one of the greats himself, said he was one of the toughest and funniest guys he'd ever met, and that Stefan left them too soon. But regardless of that, he had achieved so much in such a short time. And he didn't just stop there. He went on to talk about how Bonnar inspired an entire generation of fighters, saying that they owe him big time for the impact he made on the game. Also, Megan Olivey, a familiar face in the MMA world, talked about how kind he was. She said that any MMA fan will know that Bonnar was a true pioneer in the sport, but most people don't know how kind and fun he was to work with. She said that whenever they would see him, even after his fighting career, he still lit up the room. All of this is enough to tell you that he didn't just have an incredible impact on the sport, but the fighters and everyone involved as well. He was a true legend and a genuine soul. So there you have it. From the impact his death has had on the entire MMA community to the shocking news of his accidental drug overdose, those were all the details behind Stephan Bonnar's death.